My name is Elena Park, though most people who actually know me call me Len. I am 35 years old, and last Wednesday, everything I thought I understood about my life slipped its moorings and drifted out into the Savannah tide. I was standing in my tiny carriage house apartment under a ceiling fan that clicks on every third rotation, staring at a rectangle of paper from Bay Street Market. 6 numbers, 6 perfect matches. The Coastal State Lottery ticker on my phone confirmed it. $52 million. I read the numbers once, twice, a third time, as if the screen might suddenly correct itself and return me to the world. I recognized the one where I counted coupons and apologized to my landlord for paying rent 2 days late. If you're reading this right now, drop a comment telling me where you're viewing from. And before I tell you about the decision that changed everything, hit like and subscribe to hear more real stories about loyalty and betrayal that might just shift the way you see your own relationships. My hands had that strange tremor you get after a near miss on the highway, the adrenaline aftershock that insists you are in danger even when the road is clear. My breath snagged. The lottery website said I was the sole winner. After taxes, they estimated I'd take home something in the ballpark of $31 million. $31 million. I had been proud earlier that morning for stacking digital coupons to get a discount on laundry detergent and oat milk. I laughed, a quick, unbelieving sound. Then I set the ticket on my dining table, really a thrifted desk with a burn mark at the corner, and I did the most practical thing I could manage. I locked the door. Then I checked the deadbolt twice. A thought cut through the static like a clean blade. I would tell no one. Nothing dramatic announced that thought. No orchestra swelled, no lightning over the river. Just a steady, hard clarity anchored by years of small lessons that I had pretended not to learn. I have a long, warped history with family and money. It starts in polite places, holiday tables, graduation parties, moving day, and curls into uglier shapes. Whispered judgments about who carries their weight, the kind of advice that sounds like care but lands like a reprimand, 100 IOUs and next months that dissolved like mist over the marsh. Before that Wednesday, my life was tightrope ordinary. I worked as a forensic bookkeeper at Harrow & Cotter, a small marketing firm's partner agency that moonlights as a crisis fixer when campaigns wobble and the numbers stop making sense. Forensic bookkeeper sounds glamorous. It isn't. Mostly, it's receipts, reconciliation, and a politely ruthless attention to detail. On good days, I felt useful. On bad days, tax season days, it was 60 hours of catching other people's mistakes, while my boss, Benton Harrow, praised our resourcefulness to clients, using my decks with his name swapped onto the cover. I made enough to live alone in a one-room place near Forsyth Park, with a window that frames a drape of Spanish moss like a lace curtain and a hatchback so old it complains when it rains. I knew exactly which grocer discounted produce after 8, which bus routes got me from my side street to Bay Street on time, and how to stand at a party so no one guessed I was counting what the snacks cost the host. Morning routine. The kettle sings at 6:02. Coffee. A quiet check of my bank app, the numbers lined up like a chastity belt. I ran 3 miles by the river when it wasn't swamp thick outside. When it was, I paced my living room between chair and kitchenette until my shoulders loosened. Then work. Then home. Then spreadsheets for myself that no one saw. I kept a modest emergency fund that had never felt remotely like enough. You know the way an engine makes a note when the timing's off? That sound haunted my days, a sense that one blown tire or one misfiled claim would pitch me into the ditch. Family is where the off note grew loud. My mother, Marisol Reyes' art teacher smile, ceramic glaze under her fingernails, married Graham Whitaker 2 summers after my parents divorced. Graham is a contractor whose generosity tightens like a wrench when the conversation turns to her grown kids. He's the sort of man who will help you move a sofa and then send an itemized list of the gas, tolls, and time off site. My father, Thomas Park, taught physics at a public high school until he retired. He married Vivian, a realtor whose Instagram is a mood board for lives like mine to admire. She notices things like scuffed shoes and gently suggests better choices. My younger sister, Camille, is the golden sheen that follows wealth around without making a sound, smart and diligent, married to a surgeon named Peter, 2 children with names that sound like heirs. My older brother, Noah, is charm and smoke. He is as intelligent as anyone I know and as allergic to staying put as summer heat is to the shade. Money slides through his hands like river water. Then there are the aunts. Rosa Delgado, my mother's sister, the soul of a quiet lighthouse. She lives in a 1-bedroom, keeps plants alive from nothing, and never arrives empty-handed. And Lenora Whitaker Graham's sister, who married old Savannah Money, wears pearls to the grocery store and offers advice that fillets you with a smile. Thank you is Lenora's son, my cousin, the kind of funny that makes you forget to watch your wallet. It sounds like a soap opera. It isn't. It's Sunday dinners and brisk hugs and chairs scraping tile. It's also where the ledger of favors and debts took on a life of its own. When Noah needed $4,800 to bridge rent until the gig pays out, I drained my savings. Months later, I learned the gig was a bar tab that behaved like a hydra. When Camille asked me to put $1,700 on my card for overages on the reception because the venue just switched policies, I did, and then life got busy, and 5 birthdays later, the overages lived with me. When Thomas called after a storm peeled shingles off the bungalow he and Vivian were staging, I sent what I could and then watched photos of them at a needed decompress on a street. Augustine Beach drift by on Vivian's feed, captioned with palm tree emojis. Each time I told myself a story. Family helps family. The story left out who counted as family when the wind blew the other way. So when those 6 numbers aligned a string of dates braided from other people's lives, mine included, my birth month and day, my mother's, my father's, Aunt Rosa's, Naomi's hope felt like a trap door and a rescue ladder at once. I wanted to call Naomi first. Naomi Chen is my best friend from college, now an ER nurse who rotates shifts like a soldier of light. She is the one person who has never asked me for anything she didn't also offer to give. When I almost did call her, thumb hovering over her name, something in my chest tightened. Not even Naomi, I thought. Not yet. I didn't sleep. I cycled through articles about lottery winners who insisted they were lucky until their lives slid apart like wet cake. The cautionary tales piled up. The cousin you've never met who arrives with a bridge loan plan, the sudden generosity that is really auditioning for your patronage, the collapse into bankruptcy 5 years later in a house that was never really yours. One article called the lottery the fastest path to isolation. I closed my laptop and listened to the night, the neighbor's late TV, a distant boat horn on the river, a woman across the alley laughing and then shutting her window with a final click. At 8 a.m. I texted Harrow and Cotter. Not well today, working from home. Then I put on the only blazer I own that doesn't look like it has given up, and I walked to the office of a trusts and estates attorney whose name I had written down at 3 a.m, Priya Menon, J.D., LL.M. Her office sits in a renovated brick building that used to house a cotton broker. Now it smells like lemon oil and a better life. The receptionist offered water. My knees felt like I'd run 10 meals. Miss Park, Priya said when she came out, hand extended, eyes friendly but sharp. What can I help you with? I set the ticket on her desk as if it might explode. I need to claim this, I said, without anyone knowing it's me. Her brow lifted, a heartbeat's surprise. Then only the quiet efficiency of someone who has seen detonations before. You've come to the right place. We talked blind trusts and shell names, staggered deposits and tax brackets. How to build a wall between me and every person who would try to scale it with a story. The most common mistake, Priya said gently, is telling too many people too fast. People mean well until they don't. Privacy is a muscle. We'll help you keep it strong. Outside, the air had warmed into a soup. I carried a folder of documents that made my hands sweat and a list of next steps that felt like learning a new alphabet. I walked Bay Street past tourists who didn't know anything about me and stopped at Mr. Lupo's market because he has known me since I was broke in college and bought one apple at a time. He bagged my coffee filters and nodded at the sky. "Storm later," he said. "You got a plan for rain?" I almost laughed. I almost cried. "Working on it," I said. Back home, I sat at the second-hand desk and pressed the ticket flat with the palm of my hand. I thought about saying nothing and letting the money sit under its new name like a tide pool, unseen. I thought about the people I loved who would feel betrayed by that silence. Then I thought about the other kind of betrayal, the soft and constant kind that teaches you relief is something you must earn with obedience. I exhaled, long and slow, and wrote in my notebook, the one where I keep numbers and truths. Tell no one, not yet. Decide who deserves to know after the undertow calms. Build the life first. Then invite people into rooms where they won't knock over the furniture. The fan clicked. The numbers on the ticket didn't move. Out beyond the park, the marsh breathed with the tide, the same as it had the day before, the same and not the same. I turned the page in my notebook and wrote a second line, firm enough to dent the paper beneath it. Protect the secret until it protects you back. Before the lightning bolt of numbers, my life had been built on routines so ordinary they could have been stitched into wallpaper. I'd wake before dawn, the fan clicking overhead, the hum of cicadas not yet silenced by morning traffic. I brewed coffee in a battered French press with a hairline crack and poured it into a chipped mug that once bore the logo of a bookstore long since gone. Then I'd open my laptop to scroll through bills and payment due dates. Being a forensic bookkeeper meant I could see every ghost of a decimal point in other people's accounts. But my own bank balance felt like a rickety bridge across a swamp enough to hold me for now, but not if I lingered too long. My emergency fund was modest, a cushion of a few thousand that never stayed soft because every time life sneezed tires, co-pays, rent spikes, it collapsed like wet tissue. The office at Harrow and Cotter was all glass and exposed brick, which made everyone feel like they were important, though the truth was we were a boutique agency forever hustling to keep contracts alive. Benton Harrow, one of the partners, had a knack for appearing polished and visionary in meetings, even when the brilliance had been dug out by someone else's hands, often mine. Twice in the last quarter, he had presented my entire audit as his, smiling like a man who believed in karma as long as it owed him interest. At least Naomi understood. Naomi Chen had been my roommate during sophomore year, and even after she buried herself in the hospital's night shifts, we carved out evenings once a week. She was a nurse who could turn chaos into calm with a few clipped words and a steady hand. Years ago, when I was too proud to admit my power had been shut off, Naomi noticed the candles and paid the bill without asking. She never mentioned it again, except once when she teased me about finally getting grown-up lamps. But family, that was another ledger entirely. My mother, Marisol, still carried paint smudges on her forearms like jewelry. She remarried when I was 15, 2 years after the divorce. Graham Whitaker, her new husband, was a contractor who calculated generosity like he priced jobs by the square foot, by the hour, by the tolerance of inconvenience. For Graham, I was never included in the blueprint. My father, Thomas, lived across town with Vivian, who could sell a house by walking through it in pearls and heels, pointing out crown molding as though she had personally invented it. Vivian believed appearances were everything, and she never forgot to remind me sometimes with a tilt of her head at my thrift store shoes that I wasn't playing my part. My siblings were mirrors of expectations I never met. Camille, 4 years younger, had slipped into her role as the golden daughter with ease. Ivy League degree, surgeon husband named Peter, a home designed by an architect whose name was whispered like a spell, and 2 children who wore matching cardigans. She lived in a neighborhood where even the grass looked wealthier than mine. Noah, my brother 3 years older, was the opposite. Charm in human form, unreliable as tidewater. He could make anyone laugh in a room, but he also left unpaid tabs in his wake like breadcrumbs. If Camille embodied stability gilded in gold, Noah was improvisation incarnate. There was extended family too, each with their own chapter in the saga of favors. Aunt Rosa, my mother's sister, was the one soul who had given without tallying it. A librarian who worked long hours and lived in an apartment that smelled like old paperbacks and jasmine tea. She had neuropathy creeping into her legs but never complained. Instead, she knitted scarves for other people and sent me books with post. It notes tucked inside, scrawled with encouragement. Then there was Aunt Lenora Graham's sister who had married into Savannah money. Her mansion on Gaston Street was a stage, and holidays were performances in which she played matriarch. Her words were knives sharpened in politeness. Her son, thank you, was handsome in a way that covered for his emptiness, a man who turned winnings into losses at the sportsbook, then came home with explanations that began with, "Next time." My family taught me, again and again, that generosity flowed one way, from me outward. When Noah needed thousands for rehab, I wired it only to learn later the rehab was never more than a line in his imagination. When Camille wanted her dream wedding, I charged expenses I couldn't pay off, believing her promise to repay me after the honeymoon. The promise vanished. When my father called about storm damage to his roof, I gave what I could, then watched his Facebook light up with photos of him and Vivian in Florida, sunlit and smiling. I had no illusions left. The pattern had been inked in my bones. And yet I clung to small dreams, to travel to Lisbon and drink coffee by the Tagus, to return to school for something more alive than bookkeeping, to have enough in savings that an unexpected bill wouldn't feel like a guillotine. They were fragile dreams, folded and hidden like pressed flowers in a book I was afraid to open. The night of my 35th birthday, before the numbers shifted everything, I sat at my desk with takeout curry from a little spot on Whitaker Street, a glass of wine Naomi had left me in a gift bag, and I felt older than I should have. Birthdays do that when you're measuring your life against receipts and due dates. I thought of Benton taking credit for my work that week, of Camille's Instagram-perfect kitchen, of Noah's latest half-truth, of my mother's careful smile when Graham dismissed my apartment as starter living. The lottery drawing was background noise on my laptop. I didn't even glance at the screen until half an hour later. Then the first number matched, then the second. By the third, my heart was hammering in my throat. By the 6th, my hands shook so badly I dropped my fork into the curry. 6 numbers. A whole new ledger. A life I could not yet imagine but already feared. By morning, the weight of it had settled on me like damp heat. Savannah mornings in May are thick, the kind where the air feels like a hand pressing at your chest. I hadn't slept, though I lay in bed staring at the cracked plaster above me, trying to convince myself that nothing had changed. The fan ticked on its 3rd rotation, steady as ever. But everything had changed, and pretending otherwise was useless. I padded into the kitchen, barefoot, and brewed coffee I didn't need. My hands trembled as I lifted the mug. I wanted to call Naomi. I wanted to spill everything into her ear, hear her laugh and scold me for being too calm, hear her swear that nothing would change between us. But instead, I set the phone down. Not even Naomi, not yet. Instead, I opened my laptop and began to search. Stories of lottery winners filled the screen, each headline darker than the last. Divorce, addiction, murder, bankruptcy, families suing each other over inheritance they hadn't yet received. A woman in Texas who won $30 million and was dead within 3 years after a cousin shot her in her driveway. A man in Florida who hid his ticket under a floorboard and ended up with nothing after a relative forged his claim. Over and over, the same theme. Money didn't change people, it exposed them. By 10 o'clock, I had written one sentence in my notebook in thick black ink. Tell no one. That afternoon, I dialed a number I'd copied from an article at 3 a.m. Priya Menon, estate and trusts attorney. Her office was downtown, tucked inside a renovated cotton exchange building with wide wooden stairs that creaked like they remembered another century. The waiting room smelled faintly of lemon polish. My palms were damp as I clutched my purse, where the ticket rested inside a folded receipt. When Priya appeared, she was not what I expected. Not old, not severe, but somewhere in her early 40s, dark hair swept into a sleek knot, eyes sharp and patient. "Miss Park?" she asked, extending her hand. I slid the ticket onto her desk before my nerves could stop me. "I need to claim this," I said, my voice thinner than I wanted, "without anyone knowing it's me." She glanced at the numbers, the slip of paper that had detonated my life. Her eyebrows lifted, but only for a heartbeat. "You've come to the right place." For the next 2 hours, she explained in calm, measured tones how we would build walls around my identity. In Georgia, winners could claim through legal entities. We would establish a blind trust, she suggested the name, Marshlight Trust, and all claims, accounts, and investments would flow through that shell. She warned me about taxes, about scammers, about the importance of silence. "The biggest mistake winners make," Priya said, "is talking. Once you let the word out, you can't pull it back." I nodded, relief washing over me. My instinct had been right. "Still," I admitted, "I don't want this to ruin me." "It doesn't have to," she said, "but it will change you. The question is how much control you want over that change." When I left, folder in hand, the sun was brutal overhead. I paused outside on the cobblestones, hearing the distant call of gulls. Tourists drifted past, oblivious. No one knew that I was no longer one of them. The following 2 weeks blurred into signatures, accounts, and careful structures. Priya assembled a team, a tax specialist, an investment advisor, a banker whose handshake felt like velvet. We secured the claim quietly, and one morning, I logged into an account with a number so obscene it made me dizzy. $31 million, mine, protected by names and trusts and legal distance. And yet nothing in my life looked different. I still swiped my employee ID at Harrow and Cotter each morning. Benton still stole my ideas in meetings. Naomi still texted me at 2 a.m. from the ER, exhausted but joking about patients who swallowed things they shouldn't. My car still complained in the rain, but the secret pulsed under everything. My chest ached with it. At night, I lay awake imagining scenarios. What would my father say? Would Vivian see me as respectable now? Would Camille's perfect smile crack? Would Noah ask for a loan before even congratulating me? Would my mother look at me with pride, or would Graham tally the money like another of his contracts? I thought about Aunt Rosa, who had once spent her only free weekend painting my entire apartment with me, refusing to let me pay her back. I thought about Aunt Lenora, who never failed to tell me what I should have done differently. The questions became a gnawing obsession. If they knew, would they love me or would they use me? And then a thought I couldn't shake. What if I tested them? What if I pretended I had nothing, even less than nothing, and asked for help? What if I saw, finally, who would show up? The idea crystallized like frost on glass. It felt dangerous. It felt manipulative. But it also felt necessary. I had been everyone's safety net for years, draining my savings, swiping my card, cleaning up their mistakes. Now, when the power balance had flipped, I wanted to know the truth. That night, I called Naomi over. We sat on my balcony, the streetlights flickering through Spanish moss, glasses of wine in hand. "I'm thinking about testing them," I confessed. "Testing who?" "My family. I'll tell them I lost my job, that I need help, see who comes through." Naomi frowned, her nurse's empathy hardening into warning. "Len, that's dangerous. What if you hurt yourself more than them? What if you don't like the answer?" I already know the answer, I whispered. I just want proof. She shook her head, but her eyes softened. You're stubborn. Just promise me you won't let this turn you into someone you hate. I promised. But as I lay in bed later, listening to the marsh frogs outside, I knew I was already committed. Once the idea rooted, it grew like kudzu fast, tangled, unstoppable. Every spare thought drifted back to the plan. The lottery money was secured under the Marshlight Trust, untouchable by anyone but me. The rest of the world still saw Elena Park, modestly paid bookkeeper with bills stacked like bricks and a car that rattled in the rain. If I wanted to know who cared for me, stripped of what I could offer, now was the time. I built the story carefully. My firm Harrow and Cotter had lost a key contract, forcing an abrupt shutdown. I had not received my last paycheck. My emergency fund had been drained by medical tests after a scare. The request would be simple, direct, and identical to each person. $5,000 to cover rent and medical bills until I landed a new position. Not an impossible sum, not extravagant, but heavy enough to sting. I wrote it all out in a notebook, every lie dressed in plausible detail. The imaginary medical tests, blood work, a CT scan. The firm's collapse rumors of embezzlement, job applications, half-finished resumes, interviews in the pipeline. Naomi sat across from me one evening, arms folded, shaking her head as I rehearsed. You sound rehearsed, she said bluntly. I'm supposed to. If I sound too polished, they'll believe me. If I stumble, they'll think I'm hiding something worse. This still feels cruel. Cruel is what they did when Noah took thousands from me and never repaid it. Cruel is Dad lecturing me on savings while vacationing in Florida with Vivian after I sent him roof money. Cruel is Camille spending $1,700 of my credit and pretending it evaporated. This is clarity. Naomi sighed, then leaned back, swirling her wine. Clarity cuts both ways, Len. Don't forget that. I wouldn't. But the truth was, I had been cut already, over and over. This time I would hold the knife. I listed each target. Mother, Graham. She'd sympathize. He'd saltulate. Father, Vivian. He'd preach. She'd critique. Camille and Peter, the golden couple, always over budget with luxuries. Noah, likely to vanish, but I'd give him the chance. Aunt Rosa, the one I believed might actually step up, even when she shouldn't. Aunt Lenora. Her disdain might be predictable, but I wanted it on record. Thank you. All promises, no follow-through. 10 people, all of whom I had helped at some point, sometimes at my own expense. I rehearsed with Naomi once more. Say it again, she demanded. I exhaled. The firm folded. The CEO was caught embezzling. We didn't get our last paychecks. I've been applying everywhere, but with accounting it's slow, and my savings got eaten up by medical tests. Rent is due. I need $5,000 to bridge. She frowned. Convincing. Maybe too convincing. Good. When she left, I sat on my bed with the folder Priya had given me documents, proving I would never again need $1 from anyone, and I felt the contradiction press against me like two clashing tides. The truth was safety. The lie was a storm. I was choosing the storm. The next morning, I dialed the first number on my list. My hands trembled, though I told myself it was only caffeine. Mom? I said when she answered, sounding distracted. I need to talk to you about something. Len, you sound shaky. Is everything okay? My mother's voice carried that half-distracted tone, as though she had one hand on the phone and the other rummaging through a cupboard. I took a breath, forcing just enough quiver into it. Not really, Mom. The firm, Harrow and Cotter, they shut down. Just like that. No warning. The partners were caught up in some kind of mess with missing funds. None of us even got our final paychecks. She gasped. Oh my God, that's awful. Yeah, I murmured, staring at the wall where paint flaked like brittle leaves. I've been applying everywhere, but jobs in accounting aren't exactly falling from the sky. And I hate to even ask this, but I'm short. Rent's due next week, and I had some medical tests recently that cleaned out my savings. I need about $5,000 to get through. The silence stretched. I could hear Graham's voice faintly in the background, muffled but sharp. My mother sighed. "Oh, honey, that's terrible. But, well, Graham and I just put a down payment on the cabin by Lake Marion. We're pretty tight right now." Tight. Graham made 6 figures every year with his contracting work. "I understand," I said, steadying my tone. "It's just, I thought maybe you could help, at least until I get back on my feet." "Maybe you should ask your father," she said quickly, "or even Camille. You know Peter makes good money at the hospital." I swallowed the sting. "I wanted to talk to you first." She lowered her voice. "Let me see what Graham says, but I can't promise anything. You know how strict he is about budgets, and Len, maybe this is a sign you should think about a different career, something more stable." I thanked her, though the words scraped my throat. After we hung up, I wrote in my notebook, "Mom's sympathy, no commitment. Graham control behind curtain." 2 days later, I arranged coffee with my father at a cafe near Forsyth. He was already there when I arrived, sitting straight-backed, his pressed shirt sleeves rolled once, as if he were still teaching a class. "You look tired," he said by way of greeting. "I am tired," I admitted. Then I unspooled the story. The firm's sudden collapse, the lost paycheck, the medical bills, the request for $5,000. He listened without interruption, sipping his coffee, his expression a mask of neutrality. When I finished, he leaned back and crossed his arms. "Elena, I've told you all your life about financial responsibility. This is why I said you should keep 6 months of expenses saved." "What happened to that?" "Life happened, Dad," I said softly. "Car repairs, co-pays, rent hikes. It's not so simple." He shook his head, disappointment sharpening his features. "And now you expect others to bail you out. Do you really need that apartment in that neighborhood? What about your subscriptions? You could cut those. Downsizing might be the best lesson for you." I let him lecture for 20 minutes. Words about living below your means, hard work, the market, but no offer of help. Finally, he placed his hand on mine, paternal and patronizing at once. "I'd love to help, but Vivian and I are focused on retirement. We can't dip into those funds. It wouldn't be wise. You'll survive this, and you'll learn." I walked out into the sunlight with my chest burning. In my notebook, Dad lecture. Advice is not equal to help. That weekend I drove to Camille's immaculate home in Isle of Hope. She greeted me in her athleisure set, her hair in perfect waves, children's drawings taped like curated art across the fridge. She hugged me warmly. "Len, I'm so sorry. Come in. You must be so stressed." For a moment, I believed she might surprise me. I told her everything, watching her eyes widen. "Oh my God, that's terrible. I can't believe they just folded like that." She squeezed my hand. "Poor you." Then I mentioned the $5,000. Her smile flickered. "Well, this is kind of a bad time. We just leased the new Range Rover last month, and the kids' tuition just hit. Plus, we're remodeling the bathroom. Peter is really strict with the budget." I nodded, keeping my face neutral. "I understand. I wouldn't ask if it weren't desperate." She glanced away, fiddling with her mug. "Let me talk to Peter. Maybe we could help with something smaller. Or you could stay here for a bit. The guest room's packed with storage, but we could clear it out." "Thanks, but my job search is in the city. It'd be hard to commute." She promised to see what they could do, but her eyes told me everything. Later, she texted me, "We can send $300 for groceries. Hope it helps." In my notebook, Camille appearance of sympathy, substance thin as glass. By then, the pattern was unmistakable. Sympathy was cheap, excuses cost nothing, but actual help? absent. After Camille's brittle generosity, I turned my sights to Noah. If anyone should have remembered how many times I had saved him, it was my brother. I sent him a long message, the job gone, the bills stacking, the rent due. I pressed send and waited, thumb-tapping at the edge of my phone. His reply came 10 minutes later. "That sucks, sis. Things are tight for me too. I'll call you later." Later never came. I sent a follow-up the next day. Silence. Tried calling the day after. Straight to voicemail. By the end of the week, I knew. My brother, who once sobbed in my kitchen about being a week from homelessness, while I wrote a check that emptied my savings, couldn't even bother to lie to me in person. Notebook entry. Noah vanished. Pattern confirmed. Then came Aunt Lenora. I phoned her on a humid Thursday, sitting on my porch with mosquitoes buzzing at my ankles. "Well, Elena," she drawled after I explained, "I can't say I'm surprised. That firm of yours never sounded stable. I told your father years ago you should have taken that bank job, but no one listens to me." I swallowed the acid on my tongue. "I'm just asking for a little help until I find something new." Her laugh was crisp as shattered glass. "Help? Darling, when I was your age, I had 2 children and no family money to fall back on. I taught piano lessons in my parlor to keep the lights on. You'll manage. Adversity builds character." She pivoted to stories about cousins and acquaintances who had weathered hardships with pluck and fortitude. Not a single word about offering money. By evening, I learned through Camille's text that Lenora had already spread the news. "Heard from Aunt L, she says, you're struggling. Why didn't you just come to me first?" Notebook. Lenora judgment, gossip, no help. Cousin, thank you, was trickier. He met me for lunch at a sports bar near River Street, leaning back in his chair with easy swagger. "Len, that's awful," he said between bites of wings. "Of course I'll help. I'll write you a check. You've always been good to me." I almost believed him. He had that talent, making promises sound like scripture. But when the day came to meet, he texted, "Something came up. Rain check." Then another cancellation. Then nothing. Notebook. Thank you, empty promise. Predictable. One by one, the names on my list collapsed under the weight of excuses. Sympathy flowed like sweet tea, but the glass was always empty when I reached for it. Until the call I didn't expect. It was Friday night. My phone buzzed, and Aunt Rosa's name lit the screen. I hadn't yet asked her. I planned to save her for last, half afraid of what I might learn. But her voice came through, warm and urgent. "Elena, sweetheart, I just heard from your mother." She said the firm closed. "Are you okay?" Her words hit me like rain on dry earth. She wasn't waiting to be asked. She was calling me. "I'm hanging in," I said, suddenly unable to conjure the practice script. The emotion in my throat was real this time, no rehearsal. "Can we meet tomorrow?" she asked. "Lunch my treat. We'll talk." Notebook. Left blank that night. I couldn't bear to guess. We met at a diner Rosa loved, the kind with cracked vinyl booths and a jukebox that hadn't worked in years. She was already there when I arrived, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a messy ponytail, a worn paperback tucked beside her coffee cup. She stood to hug me, and in that instant, I was 8 years old again, clinging to her side after another argument between my parents. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, holding me longer than anyone else had. "I'm so sorry about the firm. They didn't deserve you anyway." We ordered. She insisted on paying, though I could have bought the whole restaurant twice over now, and she asked gentle questions about my job search. No judgment, no lectures, just listening. When I faltered, her eyes didn't dart to her phone or glaze over. She stayed with me. Then, after the plates were cleared, she reached into her bag and slid an envelope across the table. "I want you to take this." I frowned. "What is it?" $2,800. "It's not the 5 you need, but it should cover rent at least." My chest tightened. "Rosa, I can't take this. You don't have it to spare." "Nonsense," she said firmly. "Family helps family. Besides, money comes and goes. You'll pay me back when you can, or you won't. Doesn't matter." I blinked at her, throat thick. "But your own expenses, your treatments." She waved me off. "I'll be fine. And if you need a place to stay, my sofa pulls out. It's not fancy, but you're welcome as long as you need." Tears burned my eyes. I hadn't cried during a single rejection, but here, with her, I couldn't hold it back. "Thank you," I whispered. That night, I sat on my bed with the envelope in my lap, staring at the neat handwriting on the flap. For Elena. My chest ached with a mix of gratitude and guilt, because I knew what Rosa had sacrificed. She lived paycheck to paycheck on a librarian's salary. I had noticed the swelling in her ankles the last time we met, and Naomi once told me quietly that Rosa had been skipping therapy appointments to save money. I opened my laptop and searched public records. The numbers confirmed it. Rosa had drained nearly all her savings for me. Meanwhile, my mother and Graham had just posted pictures of their new cabin. Camille had posted a bathroom remodel in progress. Vivian had uploaded shots of her in pearls at a closing. Rosa, who had the least, gave the most. I couldn't keep the lie anymore. The next evening, I invited her to my apartment. She arrived with a bag of groceries, as though I hadn't already told her I had food. She filled my little kitchen with warmth. After dinner, we sat on the couch with tea, and I took a deep breath. "Rosa, I need to tell you something, the truth." She tilted her head, calm, waiting. "I didn't lose my job. I made it up. I wanted to see who in the family would help me. I'm sorry." She studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I see. And you found your answer." "I did. You're the only one who came through." She reached for my hand. "I'm not angry, Elena. Maybe sad that you felt you had to test people, but I understand why." I swallowed. "There's more. The truth is, 3 weeks ago I won the lottery. 52 million. Her eyes widened, but she didn't gasp or drop her cup. She simply held my gaze. "Well," she said softly, "that explains why you've been carrying the world like a secret." Tears spilled down my cheeks. "You're the first to know. I couldn't tell anyone else, not even Naomi." She squeezed my hand. "Then I'll carry it with you. But Elena, remember, money reveals people. The good, the bad. You've seen that already." I nodded, knowing she was right. And for the first time since those 6 numbers aligned, I felt lighter. After Rosa left my apartment that night, the room felt different, less heavy, as if a window had been cracked open and some stale air had finally found its way out. Her money sat in my notebook like a confession. I could spend it, repay it, bury it. None of those choices erased the sting of what I'd asked her to do. I called Priya the next morning and told her I wanted to set something up. Not for me, not directly. "I want to make sure Rosa never faces what she's been facing again," I said. "I want to set up a trust or a stipend in her name, structured so that it pays her medical bills, therapy costs, and gives her a little cushion. But it has to feel like a gift, not charity. She's proud." Priya listened, and then, with that same gentle efficiency, laid out options. We could create a restricted family trust that disbursed monthly amounts directly to Rosa's medical provider and a separate account for her living expenses. If structured correctly, it could be tax-advantaged and invisible to anyone who wasn't legally entitled to know. "We'll call it the Rosa Fund," Priya said. "You can remain anonymous as the benefactor if you want." Anonymous had always appealed to me. I liked the idea of fixing harm without the mess of gratitude notes and awkward family dinners where people pretended things were the same as before. I wanted to do good without theatrics. Still, after I hung up, a quieter question lodged under my ribs. What about the rest of them? I had seen the ledger of favors, the way my help evaporated while their debts accumulated in my memory like unpaid invoices. I could become the secret benefactor for people who had let me down, but that felt performative, rewarding the very behavior I'd been trying to test. There had to be boundaries. There had to be truth. That truth drew a line through my next decision. I would call a family meeting, not to confess the lottery, not yet, but to confront the week of excuses and to stand up for myself in a way I never had before. I wanted them to see the cost of their indifference, to hear the way their words sympathy that never hardened into action cut. I wanted a small reckoning, a chance to put their behavior on the table and watch how they arranged it under scrutiny. I sent a text that read, "Important family meeting at my place Sunday at 2. I have something to say." Harsh enough to be intriguing, vague enough to draw them. The RSVP list bunched up in my phone like a guilty confession. Marisol and Graham, Thomas and Vivian, Camille and Peter, Noah, Lenora, and thank you, aunts and cousins. I felt a pulse of adrenaline at the idea of them under the same roof, a strange theater of expectation where I would be the director for an hour. The days before the meeting were a flurry of practicalities. I cleaned the apartment with a kind of clinical detachment, setting out extra folding chairs, reheating platters of simple finger food, brewing coffee so it warmed the room when they arrived. I practiced what I would say in the shower, on my walks, in the quiet moments before sleep. The rehearsed lines helped steady me. I asked for help, and most of you didn't show up. I won't let my generosity be your expectation. I'm done being everyone's bailout. I wanted to be precise, not performative. I wanted the truth to land like a stone in a pond and watch the ripples. Sunday arrived humid and bright. People came, of course. Wishful thinking told me some would cancel at the last minute, would send a flood of regret texts, but they came. My mother and Graham arrived together, his hand on the small of her back like he was still setting boundaries for who they were and were not responsible for. My father and Vivian walked in arm, immaculate and slightly defensive. Camille and Peter came with the kids in tow. Camille's smile was carefully arranged like the rest of her life. Noah slinked in late with a blank apology, as if time had nothing to do with him. Lenora swept in like a formal breeze, pearls clicking faintly. "Thank you," trailed, airy and apologetic. And when he saw the smallness of my apartment, he murmured, "You're doing so well, Len," as if scale equaled success. Aunt Rosa came last, carrying a small dish she'd insisted on making. She sat silently at the edge of the couch and gave me a look that cut through any pretense. I felt steadier with her there. When everyone settled, I stood in the center of the room in front of the thrifted desk, hands folded, voice calm but firm. "Thank you for coming," I said. "I called this meeting because there's been talk." Things were said. Rumors about my finances were passed around. Heads shifted, a few faces flushed. I want to set the record straight and let you know what actually happened and how I felt about it. I told them the basics, that there'd been a scare at work, that I'd reached out for help, that I'd needed $5,000 to cover expenses. I didn't dramatize. I simply laid out the facts, who I called, who I spoke to, who promised and never followed through. I named names with soft clarity, not accusation. Noah, you didn't respond after your message. Camille, you offered $300 and a couch. Mom, you said you'd talk to Graham. Dad, you gave advice but no help. The room shifted. Vivian's lips pursed. Lenora's eyebrows rose. Camille's face went pink, and Noah's jaw tightened like someone trying to swallow a stone. Graham shifted his weight as if he were carrying the rules of household responsibility on his back. "It's okay," my mother began, the practiced soothing tone that always felt like a bandage meant for a smaller wound. "We all have our limits." "Limits," I repeated, testing the word. "Yes, limits are real. So are choices. The choice to help or not help says something about who we are willing to be for one another." I watched them arrange their defenses. It was human, somehow. When held to the light, excuses refract into self-preservation. My role had always folded itself around those excuses like a blanket, tucking everyone in while shivering through the night. They offered what they always offered: explanations, half apologies, deflections. Vivian stroked the arm of the sofa and suggested that perhaps this was an opportunity for me to be more prudent. Lenora opined on character building. Peter asked practical questions about job prospects as if the meeting had been a networking event. Noah mumbled something about personal stuff, the kind of private drama that conveniently exempted him from accountability. No one admitted any real wrongdoing. They rearranged the mirror of responsibility to avoid the reflection I'd set in front of them. Some were plainly uncomfortable. Some didn't seem to understand why discomfort mattered. I felt an odd, cold satisfaction at the sight of them trying to dress their actions as morality. And then, as they began to file out an awkward shuffle of people relieved they had shown up for an uncomfortable hour, I realized I'd accomplished what I wanted. I hadn't shouted or shamed. I hadn't accused with a hog-tied fury. I'd simply told them what happened and how it made me feel. The lack of contrition spoke louder than any apology ever could. They left with their versions of the truth intact. After the last car door slammed and the hush returned to my small living room, Rosa stayed behind. She helped me clear plates and stack cups. "You did what you needed to do," she said quietly. "Sometimes people can't meet you where you are. That's not always on you." Her hands were steady as she rinsed a plate. I felt a strange closure settle into my bones, like a knot untangling itself. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with the empty envelope from Rosa's diner meal folded beside my tax docs. I was tired and oddly elated. The meeting hadn't been vindictive. It had been an honest accounting. The ledger had been opened and read aloud. I had given every person their chance to show up, and they had chosen their versions of generosity. I still hadn't told anyone about the lottery. I didn't plan to. The secret felt like a private map to a better life, a map that now included Rosa's house and a fund to see to her care. I had clarity, and for the first time, I had the courage to act on it. The Monday after the family meeting, I woke with sunlight spilling across my sheets, softer than the clamor of yesterday's words. I made coffee and sat at the table where Rosa's envelope still rested. I touched it, lightly, like it was a relic. It wasn't about the amount, it was about what it represented. She had nearly emptied her world to steady mine. No lectures, no excuses, just quiet, costly love. That afternoon I walked back into Priya's office, determination in my step. "I want to take care of Rosa," I told her, "but it has to be invisible, or she'll never accept it." Priya smiled like she'd expected this. "We can set up a discreet family trust. It'll pay her medical expenses directly and send her a stipend that feels like an annuity, not charity. We'll build it to last her lifetime, structured modestly so it feels natural, not extravagant." I nodded. "And a house, something near me. A single story, comfortable, easy to navigate. We'll make it happen." Leaving her office, the salt air off the river felt sharper, cleaner. I wasn't just protecting my secret anymore. I was shaping it into something that mattered. Over the weeks that followed, I sketched a different life. I gave notice at Harrow and Cotter, shocking Benton when I declined his offer to consider me for partnership down the line. I didn't need his crumbs anymore. Instead, I began building something new. A nonprofit I called Harbor Hands, designed to support elderly neighbors living alone. Too many Rosas existed in this city, people who gave everything and were left to fight life's battles quietly. Harbor Hands would send volunteers for companionship, cover small medical needs, repair broken steps and leaky roofs. Naomi joined me as outreach director. "You've lost your mind," she teased, but her smile was luminous as she flipped through my plans. "And I love it. Count me in." We rented a small office downtown. By the end of 6 months, Harbor Hands had a roster of volunteers and our first success stories. Groceries delivered, medications funded, porches rebuilt for safety. Each story steadied me, proof that money could expand outward without rotting everything it touched. But the family never knew. To them, I had simply landed on my feet with a new job that seemed to pay surprisingly well. Vivian commented that my wardrobe looked a little upgraded. Camille asked if Harbor Hands was a side hustle. Noah, predictably, called one evening with a can't-miss investment idea that required 10 grand. I told him I couldn't help. The silence on the other end was heavy, then brittle. And yet, in private, I found ways to offer anonymous aid. When my father had a heart scare and unexpected medical bills, the hospital's assistance fund received a donation that wiped his balance. When Thank You finally admitted himself to rehab for gambling, an anonymous donor covered his stay. They never suspected me, and I never corrected them. Some debts didn't need names attached. Rosa flourished in her new cottage 3 blocks from mine, with her therapy finally consistent and her books spread across wide shelves. She called it a miracle, and I let her believe it was luck. Every week we had dinner together. She told me stories of her students, her voice alive, her smile unburdened. One evening, as we sat on her porch watching the sunset paint the marsh pink and gold, she said softly, "You know, everything could have turned out differently if you'd told them right away. They would have circled close, pretended to be what you wanted them to be. But this way, you know the truth." I squeezed her hand. It hurt, but I'd rather live with truth than pretense. She nodded. Money didn't change them, Elena. It just showed you who they always were. And she was right. The experiment, the secrecy, even the pain it had given me freedom. Freedom to choose who belonged in my circle, to spend without fear, to build without apology. A year later, I had a life I could never have pictured. A modest home with a garden, Rosa's laughter echoing nearby, Harbor Hands helping hundreds across the city. I still drove my rattling hatchback, though now more from affection than necessity. Naomi still joined me every Friday night, wine glasses clinking as we laughed over the week. The rest of my family? They drifted in and out, polite but distant. Birthday calls, holiday dinners, the same veneer as before. But beneath it, I no longer hungered for their approval. I no longer defined my worth by what I could give them. And that was the greatest gift of all. Have you ever had to test someone's loyalty in your life? What did you learn from it? Share your stories in the comments below. And if mine resonated with you, hit like and subscribe for more stories about family, betrayal, and the lessons that just might change how you see the people closest to you.